Well, our families can certainly throw us for a loop. And I have to tell you, I am living that this morning. If you were to be standing outside of our church about 1 hour and 15 minutes ago, you would have seen Walpole lights and sirens, ambulances, police cars, fire engines pull right up in front of my house and come running in the door. About an hour and 15 minutes ago, we were on the phone with our pediatrician holding my son Luke, who's just 18 months, saying, he's vomiting a lot, and he seems to maybe have purple lips. Whoop, I'm calling 911, said the pediatrician. And so in came Walpole's finest to find our very startled son. My husband, Andrew, ended up taking Luke to Norwood Hospital, and I just received, I've been getting text updates the whole time, so I'll let you know I've been on the edge of my seat, prepared to kind of walk out the door at any moment of worship, but I just got a text about 3 minutes ago saying that he's all fine, and they're coming home now. So thank God for that. But boy, our families can throw us for a loop. Isn't that true? Can I get an amen? Amen. Our families can throw us for a loop, and we are never really prepared sometimes for what comes at us. And it's not just those medical situations. Sometimes it can be emotional upheaval that throws us for a loop, and we can be sitting there, standing there, asking ourselves, what the heck is happening? Or what the heck just happened? That happens a lot of times. In some ways, it seems like our family members, even though we know them better than we know anybody else in our lives, sometimes it feels like we understand them the least. Maybe that's because we're so close to our family. We're so emotionally invested in our families that whenever things seem to go awry or people fly off the handle or loose cannons are set loose, we are left just dumbfounded at best, and sometimes deeply hurt and wounded and confused and angry and all kinds of things, asking ourselves, what the heck happened? What is going on here? Why does mom care so much about getting a fresh turkey instead of a frozen turkey? Why is dad so angry about his son going to art school? Why is grandpa never ever happy to see Aunt Mary? I don't know. It can confuse us and confound us. What is going on here? What's the real story? And in many ways, the story that we just heard and read from the Bible today, this story of Noah and his children, is just deeply, deeply confusing. What is going on here? Now, on one level, we should all take comfort for the fact that a family as dysfunctional as this was still chosen by God to populate the whole earth, was still chosen by God as the best family on the face of the earth at that time. So God can work wonders and miracles and blessings through all kinds of families. We do not need to have perfect families. That's never the goal. Hunky-dory perfect families, I don't actually think that they exist. God works through all kinds of families. But in those families, what is the real story? What's going on here? The Bible story is so confusing. See, Noah has these 3 sons we read, and then Noah gets drunk. You can kind of hardly blame him. He just lived through a mass genocide of the whole earth, and he was like in charge of saving the entire planet. The man was probably under a lot of stress, so he takes a break, he gets drunk, but then there's this confusing bit about him lying naked, uncovered in his tent. Now, my hunch is maybe this wasn't the first time that Noah had ever gotten drunk and laid naked, uncovered in his tent. But maybe this was the first time that Ham did something about it. Maybe this was the first time that those unwritten rules that almost every family has, the playbook for how to exist in that family, maybe this is the first time that somebody stepped out of those rules. Ham tells his brothers, Dad's drunk, and he's in the tent, naked. And then the two other brothers scramble to cover it up, to keep the family status quo, I'm guessing. And they do this strange, elaborate dance, really, that's described in detail, where they walk backwards into the tent with a blanket over them so they can lay it on their father without looking, averting their eyes. They don't want to see what's truly there. They don't want to see the full picture. I think most of our families have a system of status quo. And this is how groups of people are. We get comfortable operating together by maintaining harmony and status quo. And sometimes the status quo is very healthy, and all of those unwritten rules about how to be in relationship to our families help us just maintain a healthy family system. But sometimes those unwritten rules and status quo, the playbook for how you're supposed to interact with Dad, what you're not supposed to say to Mom, don't tell Grandpa about Uncle Bob. Sometimes those unwritten rules are actually what's keeping us in unhealthy, maybe even dangerous situations. And it takes brave individuals in those cases to break the rules. It takes brave individuals in those cases to take a step back and maybe say what's actually there. Hey, Dad's drunk in the tent. Maybe everybody knew it, but nobody had said it out loud. We truly can't know entirely the full picture of this family tale. As much as I can guess about what was going on, the truth is we'll never know the full story. The only people who will really know the full story of what was going on that day at Noah's tent are Noah and his sons. All of this is guessing and hypotheses. But here's the other truth about families that I've seen and learned about and also experienced myself. There is always a story behind the story. There is always a story behind that story, and there's usually a story behind that story, behind that story, behind that story. Some of the unwritten rules and some of the dysfunction and some of the way things are is because of things that happened generations ago. That's the other amazing thing that God is telling us in this story of Noah. See, what confuses me most in some ways about this story, but it makes perfect sense on another level, is that Noah never blames Ham, and he doesn't curse Ham for stepping out of line. He curses Ham's son. And in many ways, it's just God letting us know that sometimes the pain and dysfunction of families can span through generations. And for us to know the cause of what's going on in our families, the cause of people's crazy and outlandish behavior, the cause of what confuses us most might mean looking back a generation or two, finding that Noah story. What's the story behind the story? Today, I want us to think about what it might look like if we started looking at our own families a little more objectively. If we started taking a step back from some of the things that confuse us most. If you're ever in a family situation where you're thinking, what is going on? Why would somebody act like that? How could this be? Instead of getting mad and invested and engaged as an actor right in that room, what if we took a step back and got curious? What's the story behind this story? And what's the story behind that story? At the end of the day, I truly believe all of us are living stories upon stories upon stories. And if we start asking the questions, we might start uncovering some of the truth. Now, your family might resist this, just as Noah resisted being exposed and uncovered. Families don't generally like that, and you might get a reaction. There could be a chain of events if you start asking questions. So tread carefully. Our families can be explosive at times. Don't we know it? But don't be turned off by this request. Don't be turned off by this ask. Start thinking and getting curious. You know, one of the people who most confounded and confused me from our popular culture for years was Aaron Hernandez from the Patriots. How many people know about Aaron Hernandez? I mean, we are in Patriots country. Yes, we know Aaron Hernandez. Aaron Hernandez played for the Patriots, and he murdered people for seemingly no good reason. I mean, spilling their drink on him at a bar, he would shoot them later that night. He's tied to possibly multiple murders, and then he died by suicide. Many of us sort of wrote off Aaron Hernandez. On one level, on one surface level, Aaron Hernandez looked like somebody who just was used to getting his own way, was a bully who had some skills, and used violence as his way of just being in the world. And on one surface level, all that was true. But what was the story behind the story of even Aaron Hernandez? Well, it took the Boston Globe Spotlight team to start uncovering that. And in an amazing, amazing work that they did called American Gladiator, they spent 8 hours of podcast time going deep, deep, deep into Aaron Hernandez's story. And what you found was actually the story of a little child, like all of us started off, happy and healthy, but a child who had been deeply abused by his family, a child who grew up into a man who questioned his sexuality and had gay relationships, but was in a culture, in a system that built deep shame into that, didn't allow him to be who he was. And add on all kinds of layers of toxic masculinity and a culture of just being the best and defeating people on the football team. And what you ended up with was the Aaron Hernandez we know. But wouldn't it have been amazing if at some point in Aaron Hernandez's life, some member of his family perhaps saw this explosive person, saw this person doing things that were unhealthy and dangerous and destructive? What if somebody in that family had gotten curious and just asked him, just sat down and tried to ask him what was going on? Or asked the people around him, what's going on? What if somebody had tried to uncover what was in Aaron Hernandez's tent? Jesus taught us that the truth will set us free. And so many of us are bound by the covering of decades and generations of what are unnecessary family secrets. What if we got curious about these families and went into some tents, named what was there, uncovered a little of the mess, but did so with love and openness, without blame and hatred, but simple curiosity? What goodness and light and mercy might emerge from that? To me, that's step one of dealing with sometimes the messy art of life together, to start becoming curious about the people who most confound us. So this week, I'd like you to think about those members of your family who most confuse you, who most irritate you, who most tick you off sometimes, and then put all those emotions aside for a moment and start looking for the story behind the story. Maybe break a few of those family rules and start asking, what might you uncover? Let it be so, and amen.